1. TN, Twisted Pneumatic. Let's start with the oldest panel type that you'll still find on shelves. TN, short for Twisted Pneumatic. That name already sounds like a wrestling move, but really it refers to the way liquid crystals twist to block or allow light. TN panels were the kings of the early flat screen era, and honestly, they're like that beat-up Honda Civic that refuses to die. Cheap, fast, but nobody's impressed by how it looks. If you bought a gaming monitor in the late 2000s or early 2010s, odds are it was a TN. Why? Because they were fast, really fast. They were the first panels that could push refresh rates past the boring old 60 Hz standard. Suddenly, you could get 120 Hz or even 144 Hz monitors, which for gamers felt like going from a bicycle to a sports bike overnight. Competitive esports players especially love TN panels. When you're playing Counter-Strike or StarCraft at a professional level, you don't care if the colors look dull. You care if your mouse movement shows up on screen with zero delay. TN was the king of responsiveness, and that reputation has kept it around longer than most people expected. But here's the reality. TN panels cut corners everywhere else. Their viewing angles are famously bad. Tilt the screen even slightly and suddenly colors shift, dark areas wash out, and bright spots invert. They were never meant for accuracy or pretty pictures, just speed. Manufacturers leaned into this. They marketed TN as the gamer's choice because it sounded good, but let's be honest, outside of competitive use, most people hated the color quality. Reds looked pink, blacks looked gray, and editing photos on one was basically a crime. Today, TN panels are still the cheapest option. If you walk into an office full of budget monitors, odds are some are still TN. VA panels, the contrast kings. 2. VA, vertical alignment. VA is the middle child that actually turned out pretty good. It fixes TN's terrible colors while keeping prices reasonable, and it has one superpower: contrast. VA panels quickly became popular in TVs, and you'll see why. VA panels produce the deepest blacks of any LCD technology, way better than IPS or TN. If you're watching a movie with dark scenes, think space battles or horror films, you'll notice right away that VA gives you more depth and punch than IPS can manage. That's why many budget and mid-range televisions use VA panels. They look far richer than TN without the massive cost of OLED. In terms of monitors, VA is the middle ground. It can reach decent refresh rates for gaming, but the response times are usually slower than TN or modern IPS. That's where the infamous ghosting comes in. So when you whip your mouse around in a shooter, you might see faint trails behind moving objects. Some people don't notice, but if you're sensitive to motion blur, it's annoying. The upside is that VA delivers much better color and contrast than TN, making it a great choice for people who use one screen for everything. A bit of gaming, a lot of Netflix, maybe some work. It's not the best at any single category, but it's solid across the board. 3. IPS, in-plane switching. IPS is like pizza. It's the safe choice everyone agrees on, and there's a reason it's everywhere. IPS was first developed by Hitachi in the mid-1990s as a way to solve TN's color and angle problems, and it's been improving ever since. Apple really helped make IPS mainstream when they put it in their iMacs, MacBooks, and Retina displays. Suddenly, everyone wanted those wide angles and bright colors. So what makes IPS special? First, the color accuracy. IPS panels are known for producing consistent, realistic colors, which is why photographers, video editors, and designers swear by them. If you're editing a photo and the red looks red instead of salmon pink, that's IPS doing its job. Second, the viewing angles. Unlike TN or even VA, IPS panels look nearly identical no matter where you're sitting. You can be off to the side or standing above your monitor and the image doesn't shift dramatically. That makes them great for collaboration. Showing someone else your screen doesn't mean they see a washed-out version. There is one weakness: contrast. Blacks on IPS panels often look more like dark gray compared to VA or OLED. If you're watching a horror movie, those deep shadows don't feel quite as immersive. Manufacturers have tried workarounds like local dimming, but fundamentally, IPS can't reach OLED-level darkness. Still, IPS has become the safe choice. It's not the absolute fastest, not the deepest black, but it balances everything so well that most people don't even think twice. Just like how you shouldn't think twice about liking this video. 4. OLED, organic light emitting diode. OLED is like bringing a Ferrari to a go-kart race. It's overkill, expensive, and absolutely beautiful. Unlike LCD panels, TN, VA, and IPS, which all rely on a backlight shining through liquid crystals, OLED is completely different. Every single pixel in an OLED display produces its own light. That means when a pixel is off, it's truly black. No gray haze, no light bleeding through. That's why OLED screens look so jaw-droppingly good. Blacks are perfect, contrast ratios are basically infinite, and colors jump off the screen in a way LCD panels just can't match. That's why gamers love OLED, because response times are basically instant, motion feels buttery smooth, and the lack of ghosting makes everything crisp. Movies and shows benefit too. Those dark sci-fi scenes suddenly feel cinematic instead of muddy. So what's the catch? Two things: price and burn-in. OLED panels cost more to make, which means OLED monitors and TVs are still on the expensive side. While manufacturers have made huge progress reducing burn-in, OLED pixels can suffer from burn-in if static images stay on the screen for too long. That's why some people hesitate to use OLED for desktop work, where toolbars and taskbars don't move around much. Have you experienced burn-in? Let me know in the comments. Mini LED, a newer twist on LCD technology. Remember how IPS and VA panels use a backlight? Normally, that backlight is made of larger LEDs spread across the panel. Mini LED changes that by using thousands of tiny LEDs instead. Why does that matter? Because smaller LEDs means much more precise control. Instead of lighting up the whole screen at once, the display can brighten or dim small zones independently. That gives you better contrast and reduces the dreaded blooming effect, where bright areas bleed into dark ones. Mini LED doesn't quite reach OLED's perfect black levels, but it gets much closer than traditional backlit LCDs. It's also brighter than OLED, which makes it great for HDR content. If you've ever seen a mini LED display crank up the brightness on highlights, like sunlight reflecting on water, you'll know what I mean. The downside is cost. Mini LED monitors and TVs are still pricier than standard IPS or VA models, though generally cheaper than OLED. Number 6. QD-OLED. Finally, let's talk about the new kid on the block, QD-OLED, or Quantum Dot OLED. It's basically OLED 2.0, combining the self-lighting pixels of OLED with quantum dot technology for even better color and brightness. Here's what makes it different. Regular OLED uses white light filtered through color layers, which can limit brightness and color volume. QD-OLED uses blue OLED pixels that pass through a quantum dot layer to create red and green. This pushes peak brightness significantly higher, often over 1000 nits compared to older OLEDs that topped out around 600 to 700. The result? Purer colors, better brightness, and more efficient power use. Gamers are already drooling over QD-OLED because it offers the same ultra-fast response times and perfect blacks, but with added punch in the highlights. You get zero motion blur, instant pixel response, and those perfect blacks, but now with HDR highlights that actually pop instead of looking dim. Movies look incredible too. Scenes with both deep shadows and bright explosions pop like never before. Imagine watching a space movie where the stars actually shine against true black space, or a sunset scene where the bright sky doesn't wash out the darker foreground. That's the QD-OLED advantage. Samsung and Sony were the first to bring QD-OLED monitors to market, with models like the Alienware AW3423DW leading the charge. These aren't just incremental upgrades. Reviewers have called them some of the best displays ever made for gaming and media. Of course, QD-OLED is still brand new, which means high prices and limited availability. You're looking at $800 to $1,500 or more right now. And like regular OLED, burn-in is still technically possible, though improved pixel management has made it even less of a concern. But if you want the absolute best image quality money can buy in 2025 and you've got the budget for it, QD-OLED is the current king. So here's the bottom line. Your panel choice comes down to 3 questions. Question 1, what's your budget? If you're under $300, you're looking at IPS or VA. If you're $500 to $1,000, you can get high-end IPS or entry mini LED. Above $1,000, OLED and QD-OLED are on the table. Question 2, what's your main use? Gaming? Go IPS or OLED for speed. Content creation? IPS for color accuracy. Movies and media? VA for contrast, or OLED if you can swing it. Question 3, what can you not compromise on? If you can't stand motion blur, avoid slow VA panels. If you need perfect blacks, skip IPS. If you're paranoid about burn-in, stay away from OLED. Answer those 3 questions honestly and the right panel practically picks itself. And here's a pro tip. Don't just read specs, watch videos. Check out monitors in person if you can, and remember that a great $400 monitor beats a mediocre $800 one every single time. Now, while we're on the topic of specs that sound complicated but actually aren't, let's talk RAM. You know, those DDR numbers you see on every PC build. DDR3, DDR4, DDR5. Most people have no idea what they mean or why you can't just use any RAM stick in any motherboard. In this video on the screen, I'll explain every DDR generation in the simplest way possible, what each one brought to the table, how much faster they got, and which one you should actually be using in 2025. Click the next video right now and you'll never be confused by RAM specs again.